Hey Lisa, we'd love to talk. We'd love to talk about self-image and the heart chakra. Sure, Vishal. Let's speak. Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. Hey, nice to see you again.
Good. Yeah, you too, you too. Wait, can you see me?
No, I can just see a picture of you.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
it should have
Um,
been nice to hear you again, actually.
yeah, no, nice to hear from you as well. Hope your retreat went well.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, this has been a great talk, by the way. It's had a lot to do with what's been going on with me this past week or so. There's been this kind of contraction in the heart chakra, and I've been using it. It's been nice. I've been using some, the chest opening yoga asanas that have. Ooh, I'm doing it right now. I'm just rolling my shoulders back and letting the chest open, and there's a lot of emotion, a lot of stuff coming up, and what I've been noticing as well is that it's there's a lot of pain, a lot of sadness, and centered around it, I've also realized I've kind of created this, how do you say, what's corresponding with the sensations in the heart chakra is this sort of self-image, this character that I've built that I believe is worthy of love, worthy of respect, because deep down, I don't think that, the real me is worthy of all that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so it's been, I've just kind of had to like allow the pain to come up and process and whatnot. But
Yeah, that's brilliant that you're doing that. And it's it's an effect of our society. I'm not blaming our society, but it's this effect of our current social situation where we're programmed to think in certain ways which are very negative. And then when we identify with being someone, we transfer that negativity onto our thought processes. And it's not just you. Most people, when they really tune into their body, when I first really began to tune into my body, there's a lot of self-hatred and dislike that comes up because you've been taught for so many years that what you are isn't enough. And what you are has always been enough. And it's been a misinterpretation. Firstly, when your parents, if you were brought up by your parents, but when your parents were bringing you up and when the education brought you up, they had to get you to conform to their rules. And sometimes people focus so much on the negative that then you begin to internalize those rules as something that's saying that you're bad in some way or that you're not good. And then that develops through school, and you get more and more talked out of your natural flow and more talked into this person in which is projected onto you. And a lot of the time it's negative thinking, and the reason that your body's uncomfortable when you're tapping or tuning into your body is because of so many years of repetitive stories arising saying that you're not allowed. I'm not allowed, I'm not good enough, I'm not allowed, I have to work at this job, I have to do this, I have to behave like this because I'm not allowed, because I'm not good enough. And that was never the case. Your parents never meant to condition you in that way, or your education or your schooling. It's just the way that it got interpreted when there were so many restraints put on you.
yeah.
Like Khaleesi thankfully doesn't interpret. Khaleesi, my dog, she's more in line with a dingo than a domesticated dog, so I have to put a lot of rules up because otherwise she wants to dominate everything or maybe attack things or eat things. And so I have to put a lot of boundaries up, and thankfully she doesn't identify with any of those boundaries and think that in any way she's not worthy. Whereas the child keeps interpreting it that I'm not worthy of love. And because when you interpret it and identify it, it feels uncomfortable. So as soon as you identify with being you, it feels uncomfortable. So it really feels real to you unconsciously that you're not lovable because it feels like the I am has been taken away, that your presence, that your love has been taken away. So, and then your mind thinks your mother's taken it away, or the schooling's taken it away, or your behavior's taken it away, but it's because you've identified, and as soon as you identify, you feel limited, and your I am feels diminished. Your love, your natural love of being, feels gone, vanished, because your focus is on this story of not being enough, and then these feelings in the body, and then this seeking to try to obtain being enough. And it's completely nobody's fault. There isn't even somebody there that I'm speaking to that I'm saying it's not your fault, because you aren't any label that you put on yourself. It's a happening that's arisen in our current state as humans. And it's not your job to undo it either. We get this responsibility. We feel like we're guilty for not being happy, or we're guilty for feeling bad. But none of it is anybody's fault. It's something that's formed. And now, once it's been seen, it feels like you're seeing it, but there's instructions of how to relax all of that. And that's not your doing either, but that's very wise, because there is a way out of this. Nobody's doomed, nobody's stuck in it. It's just seeing you're not anything. You're not this, you're not that. And not even that feeling that arises in your heart that says to you, I'm not enough. Beyond that, surrounding all of that, is the I am and the empty looking. It's just the focus is on the heart area, because it's painful.
Yeah. I think there's, I don't know, maybe there's an undue amount of focus on the heart area. And, what you just mentioned, that, it's not my, I forget how you phrase it, but that it's not my responsibility, I guess, to free myself from it.
And it was never your fault that it happened. A lot of people feel very guilty for feeling bad. But when you logically look at what happens in our society and what happens to all of us, of course we're going to end up feeling bad.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah,
of
I think
society
that's,
isn't feeling good. They just cover it up, and it just comes out when they have really traumatic situations, like when something shocking happens, when their coping mechanisms begin to collapse.
yeah. And I've seen that in relationship with other people, that their sort of, how do you say, their defense mechanisms trigger my defense mechanisms, and it's a wonderful opportunity to this and that. But it's just, I don't know. I feel like there is this sort of impulse towards, maybe the love is already here, and this impulse to work at discovering the love.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the impediment,
Not necessarily. That can be a really good thing, because if you just go back onto doing nothing, you'll go back to your old ways of being, which will encourage the identity. Like you'll go back to, so if you say, oh, screw the whole spiritual path and screw feeling the heart area, and you'll go back to your looking for it in women, or looking for it in relationships, or looking for it in work. So it will just manifest in that way. In this way, in your efforts to explore what's happening in your body mind mechanism, this can only have good effects. But the liberation isn't yours and isn't your doing. But that can only be a positive thing, to look at all these dynamics, because it's you're seeing it's not true, and you're not falling for all the loops of what your personality dictates. There's a putting on the brake to things. It just doesn't feel comfortable for a few years. Most people's process.
Sorry, did you say years?
Yeah, for a few years. For I would say for about 8 years, I was rolling around in quite a fair amount of agony undoing myself. People like to look at me and think, oh, it's hopeful because she looks young, but I would say 8 years and 3 years of particularly rolling around in agony, but not all the time. There were moments where it opened and expanded, but there was 8 years of intensive seeking. And the 3 or 4 or 5 years before that was a high with finding the subject, and then there was an 8 years of really getting serious with the agony that was inside of my body. It might have been worse for me. Maybe I had worse conditioning than some others, but maybe not. Maybe some people, it's even longer that they have to do of wriggling around in the agony.
Yeah, and I'm no stranger to that either. These past 5 years, I found a living teacher. Before it was Krishnamurti and Osho, but like with the living teachers, it's been a very similar kind of, just the body having to, how do you say, purge, I guess, all of that trauma, karma, suffering, whatever you want to call it. But
because for me, I spent 20 years invested in pushing myself into more and more suffering. You know, so from the age of like, okay, maybe it was a bit less. So from about the age of like 6 months, as soon as my brain began to kick in, I was investing more and more in the suffering game of humans. And you know, and that's a long period of conditioning. Like if I look at my, like that's a long period of conditioning to keep every day telling somebody a story about who they are.
It is, yeah. And I guess, yeah, we've all been taught to look at it that way because that's what the way everyone else is, all the adults have been looking at it, right?
Yeah, they don't mean to push that onto you, and genetically they're passing it on too as well, but they don't mean to push it onto you. But I also feel like the education system plays a big part in it. Like
Certainly.
the education system that we are put through, it's all about job and career, and this is destined to create so much suffering in us. It's it's job and career. What are you going to do? What are you going to be? Job and career. And the pressure that our parents put on us because they don't want us to be poor, or they don't want us to be in debt. They don't want us to have financial difficulty. So this becomes so important. Your identity becomes so tied up with doing something, with working towards something. And your freedom is this moment. Your freedom is what's happening, is the joy of feeling the table. And the job and the career and the lover and the life is all secondary or way behind the immediacy of what's happening. This is, it's like you take care of now and that will take care of itself. You will begin to find your flow of how you want to produce, because we can't help it. We're creative beings. We want to produce something. We want to be a part of this society. It's natural, but that's what we're taught is the most important, doing something for the future. Work for the future. And our society is set up like that. So once we finish the education system, we're then trapped into this financial system that everybody's trying to peddle, and they believe that one day they'll financially get enough money so they can relax. But by the time they get enough money to relax, which some people do it by the time they're 30, some people do it by the time they're 25, but most of the time they're 60. But they've invested in this game so much, when they come to the point where they can relax, they're too uncomfortable to relax. They can't relax. Then when they have free time, they're absolutely terrified of not living for a purpose. They don't know how to enjoy the simplicity of walking, the simplicity of rain falling, the simplicity of laughing, the simplicity of buying your shopping. They only know the mentality of working towards something and achieving something.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it's not just about survival either. I think, I've been raised to, I have to be the best at what I do in order to gain, again, that respect, that love, that sense of worthiness.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's been good though. I feel like I have so much love and support from you and from my teachers who are here that, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe the only way out is through,
Totally. And really, really trusting the process, like 100% going for it. 100% that this is your main goal. Your main goal is to free yourself from suffering, not getting an enlightened girlfriend, not getting an enlightened life or an enlightened job, which I see a lot of people's priorities is in that. Although that might be nice and that might be pleasant, the goal is that you free yourself, not being a nice person, not looking enlightened, not looking to others like you're enlightened, nothing like that. That the goal is that you are enjoying what's happening. You're totally yourself, and yourself is the I am and the emptiness. And it doesn't require a particular life. It's this collapsing back in to the I am and the empty looking, and then life will take care of itself.
Yeah, and it's really been helpful. I think the flow of this sort of this I guess this energetic healing, if you want to call it that, it's been helpful when like going back to Ramesh's teachings and examining the sense of the doer. I mean, I feel like the doer is actually kind of clogging the the natural healing process. So even just looking at that.
It depends on your mentality. If you've had a strong sense of doership,
Very strong,
then then it's really important to really examine that. But if you've been a very victim personality structure that's always followed other people, then you maybe have to go the other way. So there is no truth. No doer isn't the truth. It's just unpicking what's there. So if you've had a very doing personality that's been very structured and going after what it wants and feels like it has to get things in the future and has to do this, then that's really important to examine that you aren't the doer.
Yeah.
It's also important for the victim personality to examine that too. But I've also noticed that for some people, that sentence, "you aren't a doer," is a disaster as well. Because they just set more into their apathy. I don't have to do anything, and that's totally not what's being said. I don't have to do anything. They're saying I don't have to do anything. The enlightenment will happen when it happens. That it's all grace, and it's a misinterpretation. Doing is always happening. Impulses are always happening. It's just they're not your doings. You're gonna do something. It's just nobody's. It doesn't belong to anyone. But there's always the appearance of choice, enlightened or not, the appearance between picking apple juice and orange juice. But you can play with it. You can stand in front of the apple and orange juice, and you can wait for no choice to arise and no doing to arise, and see how long you'll be stood there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting experiment to have, yeah.
Yeah. People in the shop might think you're loony.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I wait and no choice to arise or no doing to arise. But it's that there's nobody
That man's
there.
been standing there for 30 minutes.
Yeah. There's nobody. It's happening actually all the time that that it's belonging to no one. Like even your choices, the appearance of your choices is just coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the attraction towards teachings by your personality structure. No teaching is true. They're just relevant to unpick what's already there.
Right. I guess in my current experience, there's been, sitting with my teachers, and, I'm always the guy who asks the questions. Always, always, always. And lately, I've just been like, okay, what if I just don't go along with this? What if I just don't go along?
And what do you feel when you're asking the questions?
Well, before, I think they were genuine, like, burning questions, but at some point I felt like, there's also this sort of, there was a stink of, being the good student. I've always been the good student, the teacher's pet, that kind of thing. So I think it's been kind of an exercise in releasing that impulse as well. Again, I think, it's just seeking love and worthiness from the teacher, like I had in school, So, yeah,
that's super profound that you realize that. That's really, I watched it in a school. After I left university, I worked in a school for 3 months before I couldn't bear it anymore. And I was working in a Bangladeshi area in London. So it was first, so their parents were Bangladeshi, but the first generation was English. They were born in England, so they were English or England Bangladeshi, however they like to identify themselves. But their parents were from Bangladesh. And when I worked in the school, I noticed that the teacher only asked the boys to participate. So when he asked a question, how much is 2 + 2, and all the kids put up their hand, he only asked a handful of boys. And I watched this again and again and again, and what happened over that period of time is the other kids stopped putting their hands up, so only the boys that he was going to ask and that always got it right would begin to put their hands up. So at first, all the kids put their hand up, but then eventually just the kids that he was appreciating and interacting with put their hands up. And it could see the difference in the personality structures that were beginning to form just from that one teacher doing that. Like the effect, and what it had on the kids that he didn't engage with was disempowerment and lack of interest in what they were doing. So those kids that he didn't engage with, they would sit there quietly, but they would just, they began to stop participating in their work so much, so they lost the enthusiasm for their work. So if they went through the whole education system, you can imagine the effect and the difference between the kids that were engaged with and the kids that weren't. And eventually I went to the head teacher and I complained about this. I said I complained, and I thought it was the teacher that was doing it. I thought he was sexist or something. And she said, I have to do this because the government gives us funding on the amount of kids that succeed. So the kids that do, not the amount of kids that succeed, but the best grades we get. So we just focus on the children that we know are going to succeed, and we know it's going to be boys because at home the girls aren't encouraged to succeed intellectually, and we know it's going to be a certain percentage of the boys, so we just focus on them. And she said if we don't do that, the government won't give us enough money to feed the kids at lunchtime, and a lot of the kids don't get any food when they're at home because the families are so poor. So that was her dilemma. But the effect that will have had on all those kids at that school is huge. That will greatly affect those kids that didn't get interacted with by the teacher. It will affect their work. It will affect their whole life, more than likely, unless they begin to look at their dynamics and their conditioning. But more than likely they'll go into jobs where they don't really care about it and they're bored and they don't really want to participate and they won't particularly succeed.
Yeah.
It's really, our conditioning is so important, and our conditioning and our relationship to the spiritual teacher will be the same as what it was in school.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that that's something that you do is really profound, and you can feel it in your body, and it's because the teacher engaged with you and you succeeded, but that is in no way truth. So by doing that, you're not getting any more closer to freedom. It's a dynamic playing out in you. It's a personality dynamic. And you're not doing any better or any worse than anyone else. So what is the freedom in that situation? The freedom is your impulse to put your hand up, the words that come out of your mouth, your heart beating, the feeling of your carpet, the carpet that you're sitting or standing on, the feeling of the chair, the sound of the teacher's voice. That's the freedom. That's the only place where freedom is. Everything else is wiring. And we've all been wired in particular ways. And the quicker we see that wiring, the easier that we can change the path of our life. But that's not freedom. The freedom is what's happening. So if you're a kid that was never engaged with at school and you have a really terrible job and you really hate work, then you can see that dynamic and you can change that dynamic and you can have more pleasure when you change that dynamic. But that's not freedom. Just like you getting the answers right or you getting the teacher to tell you something or getting on with the teacher isn't the answer. You begin to believe it's the answer because you got pleasure from it. And when you got pleasure, you stopped seeking and you felt the remnants of the I am. The freedom is what's happening always.
Yeah. But that's an interesting, in regards to career, like getting something right. I'm an actor, an artist, which, what's the right answer when when you're building a character, right? There's no, it's so subjective, my career has been quite a challenge to that wiring as well. It's not like a math problem or a science problem where there is a right answer. There's a right and a wrong answer, but in this, it's just, this open-ended creative process, and it's been so, I think a lot of what you're saying, that's been my, as far as being being bold in my creativity. I think you've just touched on something that's been kind of an obstacle recently, well, for quite some time. I think I think there's a fear of being wrong, a fear of being in my artistic life as well. So maybe this is all I don't know where I was going with this, but it just seems like there's some gears turning there as well, like maybe all of this wanting to be right.
And so this is just an example to help your mind reflect on it. So then if you do have a fear of being wrong, so say with art, then there might be too much investment in what other people are doing, or looking at other people's work, or looking at where you fit in, or how you're working in the group. And and that could be a painful dynamic to do that. It could be pleasurable when you feel like you get it right, but it could also be painful and a lot of seeking in it. And when you get it right, that seeking dissipates, so you feel less of that pain and you feel more in line with the I am, and you think that that's it, I've got to get it right, I've got to flow or to do my job better. But it's actually this swinging between believing that the I am is found in pleasure and it's lost in pain. So in your job, it's hard to get things right because it's creativity and it's always changing, and trends and enjoyment and art and ideas are always changing. So that's something that's always moving. And then also if you're auditioning, there's something where you're always being auditioned, which is very intense. And you believe that when you get it right, when you get the job, when you fit in with other people, that you're more home, and that's the feeling you have. And that when you don't have a job and when you don't get the part or you feel like you don't fit in, then you feel like you've lost home. And this is totally not true. It's there in all experiences. It's in all of it. But it feels so real because your heart, it feels very physical. When you feel like you've done something wrong or not succeeded, it becomes like a physical feeling in the heart. It closes down, it feels shut, and then there's a focus on that contracted energy. And then the thoughts arise, you did something wrong, you're whatever negative thoughts are there. So you can relax it by putting your attention into feeling and breaking that pattern of going with the thoughts and seeing that there's a thought that's saying, I'm hopeless, I'm rubbish, I'm never going to make it, it's impossible, I can't get it right. So you just acknowledge those thoughts, you go right into that feeling and those instant thoughts rather than the story of what's just happened about a producer or a director or blah, blah, blah. You go right into that feeling. And then when you're ready, you can transform it, you can tell the opposite story. I am capable, I can do it. And you'll begin to feel that seeking energy dissipate, and there is the I am. And you didn't need to do anything in your physical life because it's got nothing to do with anything in the world. It's your presence, it's right here when your identity is not identifying with the pain and pleasure dynamic. But when you feel pleasure, the seeking stops. So you can feel the I am more then. When you start telling yourself that you've done well, that every decision you made was correct, that you never failed, that you're loved, you feel more still and more present. But it's not anything out there that gives you that. It's that your seeking energy dissipates in that moment. And there's the I am. You are, this is.
Oh, so you're saying maybe tell myself that.
The positive thoughts.
Yeah,
you can do that to balance, only when you're ready. So you first of all acknowledge all the negative thoughts. So say if it's saying you failed,
of course,
you can't do it, you feel that in your heart, and then you start telling yourself the positive, and you'll feel your energy pick up again. And then in that, when your energy's picked up and not in that very painful place, then you can feel the I am. This is just a practice to help feel the I am. It's not the solution. But you just begin to see really clearly it has nothing to do with the events in life. It's to do with the identification to the pain and the pleasure. That when you're in pain, you've lost I am. When you're in pleasure, that seeking stops, and then you think you've arrived somewhere, that you've got it, that you did it. And it's something to do with you. And it's neither. I'm speaking a lot though, you can go back and listen to this again.
Okay, yeah. No, and this has been some really good stuff, and I'm glad we touched on my career. I think that's something that I've kind of neglected these past couple weeks. So
yeah, it's an intense thing to be an actor.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I used to do acting when I was a child. So I did some TV work, and then when I got into a teenager, I got one role that was called Sexy Girl, and it was so horrific. So like I was in the group and they would be like, and here's Sexy Girl, and I totally didn't identify with that. I felt like a child, or I just didn't feel like, and then suddenly I had to audition for roles that were about beauty or about looks, and it used to make me feel sick because I didn't feel, it felt so terrible, so I gave up.
Mm. I've had similar experiences, except it's with being brown skinned. It's been terrorist, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, those are fun. But
They ask you
no,
to
there's still
look. Can you look like a terrorist? And you're like, hmm.
yeah.
No, I'm sure they
I
can't
don't
say
know.
that. They would be sued.
I guess I won't shave for a couple days. Yeah.
Oh, they do say that to you. They say you need to look like a terrorist.
Oh yeah.
Oh
I
yeah, they
mean,
do.
like I mean, just given the color of my skin, I already do for most Americans, I guess. But it's yeah, that's kind of been in the wheelhouse. But typically, it's doctor, engineer, smart guy. So not the worst stereotypes to have, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
So it's either smart guy, engineer, doctor, or terrorist.
yeah, yeah, basically. But no, nothing romantic. Never anything romantic.
Oh
But
yeah, you don't get the romantic roles.
yeah,
Oh dear,
uh,
it's funny.
yeah. Uh, well, hey, this has been fantastic. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else?
No, I think the doctor prescribed enough. That it's enough.
All right, thank you. And by the way, if you, I don't know if you pray or anything, but say a little prayer for my mother if you can. She's putting her dog down today.
Oh,
Yeah, leukemia.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah, I'm gonna go and talk to her and maybe FaceTime the dog as well.
oh
His
yeah.
name's Jay.
His
Right.
name's Jay. Oh, he's totally
Yeah,
free when it happens, and they normally do it in such a compassionate way. But it's so
yeah,
sad because you get so used to spending every day with someone.
yeah,
You get so used to seeing them every day. But
yeah,
it's total dissolving into love. Like the dog just melts into that spaciousness. It already is free, the dog, but then it's like it totally loses even the feeling of the form. It's total expansion into love.
mm,
Goes back to it totally being nothing. So from the
mm,
dog's perspective, it's a celebration, but from your mum's perspective, it's really sad because she's lived with the dog for every day for
yeah,
years.
yeah,
So it's a big
yeah.
part to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'll
say
be
a
with her
prayer
in this moment.
for your
I
mum.
will.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Lots of love. Thank you.
All right. You take care.
And you. Bye.
Bye.